If you want to understand why some people in their 60s and 70s maintain lean muscle mass, rapid wound healing, and cognitive sharpness that looks 20 years younger than their chronological age, while others the same age struggle with stubborn fat accumulation, declining energy, and deteriorating physical resilience, don't look at their exercise routines. Don't look at their supplement stacks. Look at one specific metabolic state they enter for 12 to 16 hours every single day that most Americans haven't experienced in decades. Here's a number that should stop you cold. By the time most people reach age 50, their circulating stem cell populations have declined by approximately 50 to 60% compared to their 20s. Stem cells are your body's repair and regeneration workforce. They're the cells that rebuild damaged tissue, replace dying cells, maintain organ function, and keep you biologically young regardless of your calendar age. When stem cell populations decline, everything declines with them. Wound healing slows. Muscle recovery after exercise takes longer. Cognitive function gradually deteriorates. And your body loses its ability to burn fat efficiently because the metabolic flexibility that allows you to switch between glucose and fat as fuel sources depends on the same signaling pathways that regulate stem cell activation. What almost nobody discusses outside of longevity research labs is that stem cell decline isn't inevitable biological fate. It's a reversible consequence of spending nearly every waking hour in a fed metabolic state that actively suppresses the molecular signals that mobilize and activate your stem cell populations. And there's one intervention that produces measurable increases in circulating stem cells within 72 hours, simultaneously activating the cellular pathways that force your body to burn stored fat for fuel instead of storing additional fat. This intervention costs nothing. It requires no supplements, no special equipment, no exercise protocol. It just requires doing less of something you're currently doing too much of. I'm an emergency medicine physician and metabolism researcher. And after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine, where I've observed the dramatic differences in healing capacity and metabolic health between patients of the same age, and after spending the last 2 years analyzing the research on metabolic switching, stem cell biology, and intermittent fasting protocols, I've come to understand something that completely contradicts the eat small, frequent meals advice that dominated nutritional guidance for the past 40 years. What I'm going to show you in this video is backed by peer-reviewed research from institutions including Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, the National Institute on Aging, the University of Southern California Longevity Institute, and the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happens during the metabolic transition from fed state to fasted state, why that transition activates stem cell pathways and fat oxidation simultaneously, and the precise 3-day protocol that produces measurable results you can actually feel while establishing a sustainable pattern you can maintain indefinitely. Most people have been told that eating frequently keeps your metabolism high, prevents muscle loss, and maintains steady energy throughout the day. You've probably heard that skipping meals slows your metabolism, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and that going more than a few hours without food triggers starvation mode, where your body desperately clings to every calorie and shuts down fat burning. These beliefs are so deeply embedded in mainstream nutrition advice that questioning them feels almost dangerous. But after spending nearly 2 years deep inside the research on time-restricted eating, alternate day fasting, and the molecular biology of metabolic switching, I've observed something that quietly contradicts that frequent feeding paradigm. Your body possesses 2 fundamentally different metabolic programs. The fed state program, which activates when insulin is elevated, prioritizes glucose utilization, activates fat storage, suppresses fat oxidation, and downregulates cellular repair and stress resistance pathways. And the fasted state program, which activates when insulin drops and glucagon rises, prioritizes fat oxidation, mobilizes stored energy, activates autophagy and cellular repair, and triggers stem cell activation and tissue regeneration pathways. Most people spend approximately 18 to 20 hours per day in the fed state and only 4 to 6 hours in the early stages of the fasted state before eating again and resetting the metabolic clock. They never reach the deeper fasted state where the most profound metabolic and regenerative benefits occur. It's like they're constantly standing at the edge of a pool, getting their feet wet, but never actually diving in and experiencing what the water feels like. Think of your metabolism like a hybrid car that can run on two different fuel sources, gasoline and electricity. When gasoline is available, the car uses it preferentially and keeps the battery fully charged, but dormant. The electric motor exists. It's fully functional, but it never gets activated because gasoline is always available. Now imagine you ran that car for 30 years exclusively on gasoline, never once depleting the tank enough to switch to electric mode. The battery system would still exist, but it would become progressively less efficient from chronic disuse. The sensors that detect low gasoline and switch to battery mode would become less sensitive. The electric motor would become sluggish. That's essentially what happens to your fat-burning metabolism when you eat constantly. The machinery exists. It's not broken. It's just chronically suppressed from lack of activation. And because stem cell mobilization uses many of the same molecular switches as fat metabolism, including AMPK, mTOR inhibition, and sirtuins, when you suppress fat burning through constant feeding, you simultaneously suppress stem cell activation. You're keeping both systems locked in idle mode. Here's what actually happens at the molecular level during the transition from fed to fasted state, and why the timing matters so much. When you eat, your blood glucose rises, triggering insulin secretion from your pancreas. Insulin is the master storage hormone. It tells muscle cells to take up glucose and store it as glycogen. It tells fat cells to take up fatty acids and store them as triglycerides. And it tells the liver to stop producing glucose and start storing it. Critically, insulin also activates a pathway called mTOR, mechanistic target of rapamycin, which promotes cell growth and division, while simultaneously suppressing autophagy and stem cell activation. For approximately 4 to 6 hours after eating, insulin remains elevated enough to maintain this storage program. Your body is in building mode. This is healthy and necessary. The problem arises when you eat again before insulin has fully normalized, which resets the metabolic clock and prevents the transition to fat-burning mode. If you're eating breakfast at 7 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6 p.m., and an evening snack at 9 p.m., you're essentially maintaining elevated insulin for 14 to 15 hours per day. That leaves only 9 to 10 hours for insulin to drop, and most of that time you're sleeping, so you're not demanding much energy anyway. The metabolic switch to fat burning typically begins somewhere between 8 and 12 hours after your last meal, depending on what you ate, how much glycogen you had stored, and your individual metabolic flexibility. Once glycogen stores in your liver become depleted, your liver begins breaking down stored fat into ketone bodies and free fatty acids that can fuel your brain, heart, and muscles. This metabolic transition triggers a molecular cascade. AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase, becomes activated when cellular energy charge drops. AMPK then inhibits mTOR, which removes the brake on autophagy and stem cell mobilization. Sirtuins, particularly SIRT1 and SIRT3, increase activity when NAD+ to NADH ratios rise during fasting. And growth hormone secretion increases, particularly during overnight fasting, which helps preserve muscle mass while promoting fat oxidation. Now here's where stem cells enter the picture. And this mechanism wasn't fully understood until research published in the last 5 years mapped out the connections. Your bone marrow contains populations of hematopoietic stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, and endothelial progenitor cells that remain relatively quiescent most of the time. When metabolic switching occurs and these molecular signals change, AMPK activation, mTOR suppression, elevated growth hormone, increased sirtuins, these stem cells receive mobilization signals. They proliferate, they enter the bloodstream, and they become available for tissue repair and regeneration. Think of your stem cells like an emergency maintenance crew that normally stays in the depot, waiting for the call to deploy. When you're constantly in fed mode with insulin elevated and mTOR active, the message being sent is, everything's fine, plenty of resources available, no need to send out the repair teams. But when you transition into fasted mode, the message changes to, resources are constrained, time to optimize efficiency, mobilize repair crews, clean up damaged components, and prepare for restoration. That's not starvation. That's strategic cellular housekeeping that only happens when your body isn't preoccupied with processing incoming food. Let me walk you through the specific research demonstrating these effects, because this isn't theoretical speculation. This is measured, documented, peer-reviewed science showing exactly what happens during fasting windows. Researchers at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute, led by Dr. Walter Longo, conducted a landmark study examining the effects of prolonged fasting on stem cell regeneration. They demonstrated that fasting cycles lasting 48 to 72 hours triggered a coordinated stem cell-based regeneration response. Specifically, fasting reduced circulating IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, by approximately 40%, which removed the suppression on stem cell self-renewal. PKA, protein kinase A, activity dropped, which de-repressed stem cell activation pathways. And upon refeeding, there was a massive coordinated expansion of stem cell populations that regenerated damaged and aged immune cells. The researchers stated that fasting essentially flipped a regenerative switch, changing the signaling pathways inside stem cells from a dormant state to one of self-renewal. Now, I know what you're thinking. That study used 48 to 72-hour fasts, which sounds extreme and unsustainable for most people. And you're right. But subsequent research demonstrated that shorter daily fasting windows, particularly 16 to 18 hours, produce many of the same molecular signals, just with less intensity. The benefits are dose-dependent. Longer fasts produce stronger effects, but even moderate fasting windows produce measurable results. A study published in Cell Metabolism from researchers at the Salk Institute examined time-restricted eating, where participants confined all food consumption to an 8 to 10-hour window daily, fasting for 14 to 16 hours. After 12 weeks, participants showed significant improvements in multiple metabolic markers. They lost an average of 3% of body weight primarily from fat mass, with preservation of lean muscle mass. Fasting insulin levels dropped by an average of 14%, indicating improved insulin sensitivity. Triglycerides decreased by approximately 11%. And inflammatory markers, including CRP and IL-6, declined significantly. Most importantly for our discussion, biomarkers of cellular stress resistance increased, suggesting enhanced autophagy and cellular repair processes. Another study from the National Institute on Aging examined the effects of alternate-day modified fasting in overweight adults. Participants consumed only 25% of normal calories every other day for 8 weeks. The results were striking. Participants lost an average of 12 pounds, almost entirely from fat mass. Fasting glucose and insulin both declined significantly. Adiponectin, a hormone produced by fat cells that enhances insulin sensitivity and has anti-inflammatory effects, increased by 30%. And markers of oxidative stress decreased substantially. But here's what caught researchers' attention. Participants reported improved energy levels, better mental clarity, an enhanced sense of well-being, despite consuming significantly fewer calories overall. That subjective improvement suggests the metabolic switch was activating pathways that enhanced cellular function. Now let me explain exactly what you'll experience during the 3-day protocol and why the timing creates such rapid, noticeable effects. Most people who've never practiced extended fasting have extremely poor metabolic flexibility. Their bodies have become dependent on constant glucose availability and have largely forgotten how to efficiently access stored fat. When these individuals first attempt fasting, they experience significant discomfort: hunger, irritability, brain fog, weakness. These symptoms aren't signs that fasting is harmful. They're signs of metabolic inflexibility, like trying to run a marathon when you've been sedentary for years. The muscles work, but they're not adapted to the demand. However, metabolic flexibility improves remarkably quickly. Within 3 days of implementing a consistent fasting window, most people experience a dramatic shift. The first day is typically the most challenging, as your body protests the change from its accustomed pattern. Hunger peaks around the time you would normally eat. Energy may feel lower than usual. You might experience some irritability or difficulty concentrating. But here's what's happening beneath those symptoms. Your insulin levels are finally dropping into the range that allows fat oxidation to begin. Your liver is depleting its glycogen stores and starting to produce ketone bodies. Your AMPK is activating, and your mTOR is being suppressed for the first time in potentially years. By day 2, something remarkable happens. Hunger typically decreases rather than increases. This surprises most people who expect it to intensify. But once ketone production ramps up and your brain starts utilizing ketones for fuel alongside glucose, the desperate hungry feeling that comes from glucose dependence begins to fade. You might notice that your energy stabilizes. Mental clarity often improves noticeably. And if you check your morning weight, you'll typically see a drop of 1 to 2 pounds, partially from reduced digestive contents and reduced water retention that accompanies lower insulin levels, but also from initial fat mobilization. Day 3 is where most people experience the breakthrough. Hunger during the fasting window becomes minimal or even absent. Energy often feels better than it did when eating constantly. Mental focus and clarity frequently reach levels people haven't experienced in years. And the metabolic machinery has now been activated long enough that fat oxidation is running efficiently. Your body has remembered how to access its stored fuel. The metabolic switch has flipped. Now let me give you the exact protocol. This is based on time-restricted eating research, showing maximum benefit with sustainable adherence. You're going to implement a 16-hour fasting window with an 8-hour eating window, and you're going to do it consistently for 3 days to establish the metabolic adaptation. Here's how it works. Choose your 8-hour eating window based on your schedule and preferences. For most people, either noon to 8 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. works best because it allows you to skip breakfast, maintain normal social lunch and dinner patterns, and finish eating a few hours before bed. During your 8-hour eating window, consume 2 or 3 meals with normal portion sizes. You're not restricting calories. You're restricting the time window in which you eat them. This distinction is critical. Calorie restriction triggers metabolic slowdown and muscle loss. Time restriction triggers metabolic switching and fat adaptation without those negative effects. During your 16-hour fasting window, consume only water, black coffee, or plain tea with no sweeteners, no cream, no additions of any kind. Even zero-calorie sweeteners can trigger insulin responses in some people and disrupt the fasted state. If you absolutely need something in your coffee, a small amount of MCT oil or coconut oil provides fat that doesn't break the fast, but even that is suboptimal. The goal is to give your digestive system and insulin signaling complete rest. What you eat during your eating window matters significantly for how you feel during the fast. If you break your fast with refined carbohydrates and sugar, you'll spike insulin dramatically, store those calories as fat, and then experience a crash that makes the next fasting period miserable. Instead, break your fast with protein and healthy fats first. Eggs, avocado, nuts, olive oil, fish. Then add vegetables and moderate amounts of complex carbohydrates. This creates stable insulin response and sustained energy. Your last meal before the fasting window should emphasize protein and fiber to maintain satiety. A dinner with salmon or chicken, vegetables, and perhaps some legumes or quinoa will keep you satisfied much longer than pasta or pizza. Avoid eating within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime, regardless of when your eating window closes. This allows initial digestion to complete before sleep and enhances overnight fat burning. From clinical practice, here are 6 strategies that make the difference between struggling through 3 days and experiencing the breakthrough most people report. First, hydration is absolutely critical. Most people walk around mildly dehydrated, and dehydration dramatically worsens hunger sensations and brain fog during fasting. Drink at least 8 to 10 cups of water throughout the day, including 2 cups first thing upon waking. Add a pinch of sea salt to your water if you experience lightheadedness, as fasting reduces insulin, which causes your kidneys to excrete more sodium. Second, stay busy during your morning fasting hours. Hunger is partially physiological, but substantially psychological and habitual. If you normally eat breakfast at 7 a.m., you'll feel hungry at 7 a.m., even if you ate dinner at 8 p.m. the night before, which is only 11 hours earlier. That hunger is a conditioned response, not a genuine energy crisis. Engaging in focused work or activity during morning hours distracts from hunger and allows the wave to pass, which it typically does within 30 to 45 minutes. Third, black coffee or green tea during morning fasting hours provides multiple benefits. The caffeine suppresses appetite naturally. The polyphenols in coffee and tea activate some of the same cellular pathways as fasting itself, including AMPK and autophagy. And having something warm and flavorful makes the fasting period feel less restrictive. Just ensure it's truly black with no sweeteners. Fourth, don't make the mistake of undereating during your eating window to accelerate results. If you're only eating 1,200 calories during your 8-hour window when your body needs 1,800, you're creating caloric restriction on top of time restriction, which will trigger metabolic slowdown, muscle loss, and unsustainable hunger. Eat satisfying portions of nutrient-dense whole foods. Let the fasting window do the metabolic work without adding aggressive calorie restriction on top. Fifth, light exercise during fasted hours, particularly a morning walk, amplifies benefits. Exercise during fasted state, when glycogen is depleted, forces your body to access fat stores more aggressively. It increases AMPK activation. It enhances the growth hormone response that preserves muscle. And it typically suppresses appetite for 1 to 2 hours afterward. You don't need intense exercise. A 30 to 45-minute moderate-paced walk is ideal. Sixth, measure progress through multiple indicators, not just scale weight. Yes, you'll likely lose 1 to 3 pounds over 3 days, but that's not the most important metric. Pay attention to energy levels throughout the day. Notice mental clarity and focus. Observe your hunger patterns and whether they're decreasing. Check how your clothes fit around your waist. And notice whether chronic inflammation symptoms like joint stiffness or digestive discomfort improve. These qualitative changes often appear before significant weight loss. Now let me tell you the 5 mistakes that sabotage results and make people quit before experiencing the breakthrough. Mistake 1, starting with an 18 or 20-hour fasting window because you're highly motivated and want maximum results immediately. This virtually guarantees misery and failure because your metabolic flexibility can't adapt that quickly. Start with 16 hours. After you've done that consistently for 2 weeks and it feels manageable, then consider extending to 18 hours if desired. Aggressive approaches backfire. Mistake 2, breaking your fast with high sugar, high carbohydrate processed foods. If you fast for 16 hours and then eat donuts and orange juice, you'll spike your insulin so dramatically that you'll crash hard, feel terrible, and store most of those calories as fat. You've done the hard work of fasting but thrown away the benefits by breaking the fast incorrectly. Always break your fast with protein and healthy fats first. Mistake 3, consuming artificial sweeteners, diet sodas, or flavored beverages during the fasting window thinking they don't count because they have 0 calories. Even without calories, sweet taste can trigger cephalic phase insulin responses and disrupt the metabolic state you're trying to achieve. Some people can tolerate these without issues. Others can't. During the initial 3-day adaptation, eliminate them completely to ensure you're getting full benefits. Mistake 4, giving up after day 1 because it feels uncomfortable. Of course it feels uncomfortable. Your metabolism is inflexible, and your body is protesting a change from decades of constant feeding. Day 1 is always the hardest. Day 2 is moderately challenging. Day 3 is where the breakthrough happens. If you quit after day 1, you never reach the adaptation that makes this sustainable and beneficial. Mistake 5, treating this as a short-term diet to lose a few pounds rather than a sustainable eating pattern that provides ongoing metabolic and regenerative benefits. Yes, you'll likely lose weight during the first 3 days. But the real value is the metabolic flexibility you're restoring, the stem cell activation you're triggering, and the cellular repair pathways you're optimizing. These benefits continue and compound with sustained adherence. If you do 3 days and then go back to eating from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily, you've experienced a glimpse of the benefits but haven't established the pattern that produces lasting change. Let's lock in everything we covered because this is genuinely one of the most powerful interventions you can implement for both fat loss and biological rejuvenation. Your stem cell populations decline by 50 to 60% by age 50, but that decline is reversible through metabolic interventions that activate the molecular pathways controlling stem cell mobilization. Those same pathways control fat metabolism, which means interventions that boost stem cells also enhance fat burning. Time-restricted eating with a 16-hour fasting window produces measurable metabolic switching within 72 hours. During the fasted state, insulin drops, allowing AMPK to activate and mTOR to be suppressed. These changes trigger autophagy, cellular repair, stem cell mobilization, and preferential fat oxidation. Research demonstrates that 12 weeks of time-restricted eating produces 3% body weight loss primarily from fat, 14% reduction in fasting insulin, and significant improvements in inflammatory markers and cellular stress resistance. The 3-day protocol uses a 16-hour fasting window with an 8-hour eating window. Most people choose noon to 8 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. During fasting hours, consume only water, black coffee, or plain tea. During eating hours, consume 2 to 3 satisfying meals emphasizing protein, healthy fats, vegetables, and moderate complex carbohydrates. Break your fast with protein and fat first, never with refined carbohydrates or sugar. Day 1 is typically challenging as your body protests the change. Day 2 shows improvement with reduced hunger and stabilized energy. Day 3 produces the breakthrough where hunger minimizes, energy improves, mental clarity sharpens, and metabolic flexibility is restored. These adaptations happen remarkably quickly because the machinery isn't broken. It's just been dormant. Here's what I need you to understand. The constant eating pattern that modern culture has normalized is evolutionarily unprecedented and metabolically disastrous. Humans evolved in environments where food availability was intermittent. We hunted, gathered, sometimes succeeded, sometimes went hungry. Our metabolic and regenerative systems are designed to function optimally with periodic fasting. Those systems don't work well with constant feeding. The fed state is for building and storing. The fasted state is for repairing and regenerating. You need both. But modern eating patterns provide only one. You're not starving yourself. You're not damaging your metabolism. You're restoring the natural rhythm that your cellular biology expects and depends on for optimal function. And the benefits appear far more quickly than most people imagine possible. 3 days. That's all it takes to experience the shift from glucose-dependent inflammation and stagnation to metabolic flexibility and cellular regeneration. The body you'll have 6 months from now, the energy you'll feel, the inflammation you won't experience, the stubborn fat that will finally respond to your efforts. That body is being built starting with the metabolic decisions you make over the next 72 hours. You can continue the pattern you've been following, or you can flip the metabolic switch and activate the regenerative systems that have been dormant for years or decades. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you check right now? It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people like you who want evidence-based strategies instead of complicated supplement protocols and expensive programs. If this video gave you a clear protocol you can start immediately, share it with someone you care about who's struggling with stubborn fat or feeling older than their chronological age. These are the people most likely to experience dramatic improvements. In my next video, I'm breaking down the second most powerful metabolic intervention for stem cell activation and longevity, one that works synergistically with time-restricted eating, but operates through completely different molecular pathways. The research on this is fascinating, and the practical implementation is simpler than you'd expect. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.